everyone. So fabulous to be back with our new series of talks. And, before I explain what this is going to be about, let me just set the context. If everyone is talking about how the future is digital, if the future is digital, then the time for transformation is now. Technology is not waiting for anyone. The continued and rapid cycle of innovation that we are seeing is ensuring that technology gets weaved into pretty much every aspect of human life. And it is time that we took charge to ensure that it gets done right. And it gets done with the single purpose goal of improving human lives. I do believe that the urgency for pretty much everything digital, for digital transformation, has set the stage for technology to play the biggest role of its life, the biggest blockbuster role that you can even think of, that of being the greatest equalizer. That's the real superpower that we have to unleash when we talk about technology. And I honestly believe that given the times we are living in, that has to be job one for humankind. The kind of challenges that exist ahead of us, whether it's climate, global warming, or food crisis, inclusion crisis, we have to shift our focus from potential of technology. We have obsessed a lot about the potential of technology, and we have to start obsessing 100x more about making technology real to solve for some of these big problems that's facing humankind before time runs out. And that's the focus of these talks that I'm kicking off today, where we will focus on hosting various change makers from across the world to talk about how they are leveraging technology to solve for various problems or to bridge the gap in their sector, be it healthcare, education, agriculture, or art. And that is the focus of today's discussion. With that, let me welcome my guest for today, Abhishek. Abhishek, a huge welcome. Abhishek Poddar is the founder of Museum of Art and Photography, or it's more popularly known as MAP, which is very apt given that his goal is to put India's Silicon Valley on the art map of the world. So Abhishek, I'm thrilled that you could join me today. Welcome. And I would love to start at the beginning because I was reading somewhere how your love affair with art started, and surprise, it had nothing to do with family and the environment you grew up in, but I loved that almost little wicked twist in the tale. So I'm going to request you to start there and tell us how it all began.
Thank you, Devjani, for having me on this talk, and pleasure to be here. Going back to your question as to where this all began, so I guess you're referring to the story from school. And to tell you very briefly about that, this was when I was in boarding school at Doon School in Dehradun. This was way back in the mid-80s. And, we were allowed to go out into town only twice a month. This was to catch a movie, to go and have lunch, or, to visit somebody. And of course, we would do it much more often than that, but that was when we were busting bounds. And the penalty for being caught when you were busting bounds was quite severe, and it could even mean expulsion. So you had to do it in some garb in the middle of the night and run somewhere just to grab a bite or a drink or something. And then we discovered there were these guys who were walking out in the middle of the day through the main gate, absolutely without a care in the world. And so one day I stopped them and I said, "Where the hell do you guys go and how do you do it?" And they said, "We are going to see the printer." I said, "Printer for what?" They said they were part of the Doon School Weekly. So they had to go to meet the printer whenever they had work. And I said, "This is a brilliant scheme. So let us also bring out another magazine and go out to meet the printer." And the one thing the school didn't have a magazine on or anything on was on art. And when I even proposed this to the headmaster, he said, "But who the hell's interested in art?" I said, "That's the whole point. A progressive school like Doon needs to have an all-rounded kid So we need to get them interested in art. And he said, what a brilliant idea. So why don't you do it? And of course, we didn't want to work and we didn't have any knowledge of art. So we got him to agree to an annual magazine so we could keep making trips to the printer. And that's how the whole thing started.
As a fellow boarding kid, I can completely relate to that, the need for creativity to get out of the wall, the campus. So, and how did it go, Abhishek? How did it materialize? Did you have a magazine out? What was the response?
So, well, that was the other twist in the tale that, 6 months had passed since we got sanctioned for this magazine. Honestly speaking, I didn't even know the printer's address, but we must have made 40, 50 trips into town. And we were out every day to see the printer. And, the guy was asking that you guys are really working hard because I see you're going to the printer. Until he dropped the bombshell. This was 1985. Rajiv Gandhi had just become Prime Minister. He was an ex-Roscoe. And my headmaster calls me. He said, Abhishek, Rajiv is coming as our chief guest for our Golden Jubilee. And I've decided he's going to launch a magazine. Oh. And that's the last thing I wanted to hear. So we had to get down to work. And to get down to work, we did. And that's when another brainwave came that, what do we even know about art to write? So I said, let's write to the 10 greatest artists in India and ask them to contribute. And all my friends laughed at me. They said, why the hell would, any of these great artists even respond to a kid like you? I said, because they would understand how important it is that, a school is trying to do this. And of course, we got back only one response out of 10 until there was no place to print in the magazine because we had to get the magazine ready. And there was one page left and I got back 9 replies.
Wow.
At that time. So I could only write a thank you note. And what we decided to do is the backdrop to where Rajiv Gandhi would be launching this magazine, we put up all their replies and the paintings that they sent. So at least, as they say, ijjat bach gayi. So, and in the holidays that followed, I went to meet the artists for thanking them for having taken me seriously. And that's how my relationship with a lot of these artists began.
Wow, well, fabulous. You talked now also, and you talk a lot about the need for making art inclusive, right? Why it cannot be the luxury of just the elites. Now, for anything to change, there has to be a real need. And the question I have is from the other side, for someone like me who's not really into art, why should we care? Why is it important for us to care? Why does art have to be inclusive? So let me start there and get your perspective.
So Devjani, let's just go back to 2.5 years when the pandemic started. Maybe most of us didn't care about art then. But it was really the arts that got us through these last 2.5 years. The amount of stuff you have consumed related to the arts is what has kept you sane. Yes, technology has enabled that, but the real base of that was around the arts. Whether it was the virtual tours that you did to museums, whether it was the movies that you saw, whether it was the music that you heard, the concerts that you attended. I mean, if you look at what Germany did the moment the pandemic, when it started, they gave a $2 billion grant to their cultural institutions because they realized that this is what's going to keep us alive. Why should we care about art? How do we know our fellow human beings? How do we know what we know of the ancient Egyptian culture or the Romans or the Greeks or the Mayans? Do you know them through what they did in business? Do you know them from what they did in economics? Do you know them from what they did politically? Do you know them from the inventions that they made? You really know them through their culture. And the shocking part is, as a country, we've been losing 1% of our culture every year for the last 30, 35 years. So that's why we need to care.
And that Abhishek, is just such an important point you make, because at the end of the day, who we are is so deeply rooted into our culture. And that's where, to me, that's where authenticity comes from. And if we lose touch with who we are, if we lose touch with our culture that grounds us, the entire, we sort of lose our identity.
Totally.
it's such an important point that you mentioned, and therefore it's not just important to make art inclusive to all sectors, but I think we have to make it an integral part of the entire education system, where your values, your identity gets shaped. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but let's talk a little bit about how you stumbled on technology and the role that technology today plays in your plans. I know that India has a lot of museums, but as you yourself said in another interview that I'd read, we are not museum going people. And we don't really enjoy the experience of being in a museum. So, I mean, one, why move towards the museum idea? And two, what is the role that you saw technology play? Breaking some of those barriers that exist with respect to museums are not fun or art is not for me.
So I'd like to qualify your statement about we do not enjoy museums. We do enjoy museums. We do not enjoy the museums the way we are seeing them in India.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, okay? Yes.
Because a lot of us, when we go overseas, we are still sitting in long queues waiting to enter a museum. Sure. So if we didn't enjoy it, we would not go there.
I can spend days at Smithsonian, by the way. Just love it.
But when was the last time you visited a museum here? Would have been many, many years ago.
Yeah.
So I think the reason we need to care is also if we look at the way technology is advancing, and so many jobs are going to be taken away from people because a machine would be able to do it better. The one thing that's going to separate man from machine is going to be creativity and imagination. And nothing spurs this better than the arts do. Even if you look at any movement, Devjani, of any kind, it has really been started by the artists of that time. So they are the ones who are even more vocal about it. They are more visual about it. They are able to put it across before it gets accepted by everyone. Coming to how did we stumble upon technology, it was really not by any other means or reason. I mean, when we started, we hadn't even looked at technology in a very big way. We were looking at building a simple museum in the true sense of the word that we knew it. But when the world shut down in March of 2020, and it was almost the first Zoom call that the senior team was having at MAP, and we said, what are we going to do? So initially, we thought, of course, the pandemic was going to be there for 3 weeks because that's all we believed that it's going to be there. Yeah. But when we realized that this is more serious than that, and we said, how are we going to do anything and what do we need to do? We had our opening schedule later that year. And, it was pretty much the first time in the world that every museum was closed. So I said, guys, we are on an even playing field, whether you're the best museum in the world, the largest museum in the world, the most endowed museum in the world, any museum, everyone is shut. Now, when a tiger is chasing you, Devjani, you don't need to be the fastest person in the room. You just need to be faster than the slowest runner. So again, when every museum was shut, I said, we don't have to be the best in the world. We just have to get up and start running and doing something while everybody else is still sleeping. And I know nothing about technology, but we've got such amazing people on our board, on our advisory panel. And 2-3 of them came up that, why the hell are you waiting for the pandemic to get over and then open? Why don't you do a digital museum and do a digital launch? We didn't know what the hell that meant. And we didn't know what it would even entail. And we started working towards that idea without having something very concrete, until I was speaking to a filmmaker and he said, but Abhishek, you just can't be having someone come up on screen, make an announcement or a speech and do some entertainment and call that your opening. So I said, but what else can I do? So he said, tell me about a memory that you make digitally. And I thought that was a very interesting point that he made. So he said, tell me something that you remember having seen digitally. I said, you're very right. The moment that's over, it's almost like a blur. So he said, what you need to do is you need to make a memory as if somebody is physically coming to your museum. I said, but don't you realize the museum is far from ready? He said, but we are living in Bangalore, and technology would allow somebody to do a digital tour of your museum even if it's not ready. So, that's how the whole thing started. And we got different tech companies involved. And really, we embraced technology because we didn't know what else to do. And what we ended up seeing is, had this been a physical launch, Debjani, we would have had about 125, 130 people in our auditorium watching it. We've been watched by tens of thousands of people.
Wow.
Just because this is what technology enabled.
Wow. And you're so right. I mean, there's so many important things that you said that I just want to focus on a bit, right? I mean, in the pandemic, pretty much every sector realized the importance of digital. We've been talking about how the world is going digital. I think that change, the transition actually happened in the last 2 years. And now it's happening faster than we can handle, frankly. And I think it throws open a lot more questions with respect to how do you ensure it happens in a way that's ethical, that's secure, and those are sort of the problems we are grappling with. You also talked about I think one of the things you said, and this is the filmmaker's story, then what he told you. I think when we start our digital journeys, we often forget that technology doesn't solve all problems. You have to figure out where do you want to use technology.
Sure.
What problem, and if you don't, then you are not going to get the ROI. You're not going to get the best out of it because you're just going to use it across without thinking. And I think that was such an important point that you brought up. The third important takeaway for me is the scope for, or the need for, really strong partnerships in this digital world. Everyone will not get technology, and they shouldn't. You are the domain expert, and you will have a lot of in-depth expertise about your specific domain. And I think this is where the partnership between domain and technology becomes such an important thing. So the fact that you had people on your board you could help, and then bringing in the companies, etc. And we'll talk a little bit more about how can we build on that partnership further, because I think there's just such a big scope. Let's talk a little bit about the journey, Abhishek, and I myself, and thank you so much for getting me into it, because I've spent a lot of time just browsing and seeing stuff, and it's once you're into it, you get lost. I mean, you just get lost in it and you want to learn more. I know that you are doing some really interesting things to reach out to kids, for example, school kids, and get them. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your favorite one or two initiatives that you're driving where you see technology really make a difference?
So I'll talk about kids, and I'll talk about others also. So this was, the person who really drove a lot of this was somebody who was an ASCOM predecessor, so Mittal, who is also the chairman of the board at MAP. And he also pushed us towards this. And we have such amazing minds over here, and people who know what it can do without really getting into the nitty-gritties of it. The idea is for the seed to germinate, and then it takes its own way. So one of the conversations we had was with Rekha Menon at Accenture. And she sent us to their lab and to see what we could do together. And we decided upon a project to do a AI-powered digital twin, a deep fake of the late artist M.F. Hussain.
Wow.
Now, many of us have not had the chance to interact with him or meet with him. But this allows you to have a real-time conversation with the guy where you can ask him anything related to his life, and he answers back as on our holographic stage in real time from what he has actually spoken in his life. So this is, it recognizes certain things that you ask, and those words are embedded into that, and he spits out those answers. And of course, people try to game the system, and they're going to try and get him to falter or whatever. So we've also planted in some cheeky replies that, this you should have asked me while I was still alive, or maybe you have to repeat that, I couldn't hear it, or ask me this when you're alone. And now we had this ready, but the pandemic was not going away anywhere. And then we decided that maybe this is even going to get outdated by the time we open, because we are not yet open physically. So we decided to bring it up front and do it digitally. So now anyone can go on our website and have a chat with Hussein. And that's been hugely popular. So that was one area where art and technology met and did something which we hadn't even thought about. Another one was where Microsoft came forward, and through their technology for cultural heritage, we got selected for a project. And we had done something called Museums Without Borders, which was digitally linking different museums, which is another project, I'll say, but they were excited with that. But that FedEx had already picked up. So they said, let's do something else. And it's again through AI, they've digitized our entire textile collection, and how you can go on a journey of discovery when you pick up any one object from our collection. And that links it to a database of about 40,000 objects that they have put together from the Met's collection, from the Smithsonian, from the Cooper Hewitt, from the Cleveland Museum, from various museums around the world. And it links it in different ways. It could be because of color, shape, area, material, royalty, all kinds of different things, basically to do with textile. And how the next one then becomes the center, and it has another set of things that open up for you to be able to link onto. So you can keep on going on this endless journey and discovering. So, when I was playing with this thing after it, we just launched this last month. And there was a brocade skirt, which was one of the things that one had selected. And one of the things that popped up around that was a French hand fan from the 17th century. And I said, now, what does an Indian brocade skirt have to do with a French fan from Louis XVI's court or something like that? And when you dug a little deeper, if you turn the fan down, it has the same shape of the skirt. Now, through the way you and me would look at it, we would never make that connection, but that's what AI allows you to do. So that was another one, and that's quite popular. And for anyone who's interested in textiles or just exploring the way technology sees things very differently from us, you can again get lost and spend hours there. And it's again online for anyone to try. Something that we're doing for kids, which is quite exciting, is this new video-based learning series called Art Sparks. So pretty much like the Netflix Hotstar model, where everybody is watching a season with 8 episodes. So every season of Art Sparks also has 8 episodes.
Yeah.
The short video about 6-7 minutes long around a particular theme, and every 2 months we release a new season. The idea for this came about because we are doing workshops for kids. These are either physically or over Zoom, but you can't handle more than 25-30 kids at a time. And even in a day, if you're doing 2 workshops, you're meeting 50-60 kids requirements. And the number of schools coming to us has increased so much, and we don't want to say no to anyone. So we said this way we can get so many more kids in schools across the country or wherever they are to access what we are doing with education and art. So that's why we started doing that.
Wow. All of them are such wonderful examples. And again, it goes back to the perfect use of technology to build that experience, and also partnerships. Talking about partnerships and the entire journey that you've been on, could you talk a bit about what have been some of your biggest challenges with respect to integrating technology into your vision?
So I think initially it was because we knew we were going to do stuff with technology, but we were looking at things like holography and photogrammetry and stuff like that. We hadn't looked at disseminating it to hundreds of thousands of people across the globe. And it came both as an opportunity because of the pandemic, but it also came to us at a time when we were least expecting it, or we were ill-equipped to even handle this. And to go around and build that team when you couldn't even meet the person and everyone's locked up at home wasn't the easiest thing to do. So I think whenever a challenge comes, it actually comes with an opportunity. You just have to know where to look and how to do it. And it's never one without the other. It's two sides of the same coin. So it was daunting at first. Today, because we've become audacious, and even though we don't know what we are doing, we somehow stumble upon and learn it, because we've got the greatest companies who are supporting us, and they are happy to engage with us and teach us that. And even right now, we are having conversations with so many other tech companies for different projects that we're going to do, a lot of which I don't even know what we are talking about, but I know something will come up.
Abhishek, we're blessed in India to have so many innovative startups and also smaller tech companies. And if any of these guys, after listening to this, come up with some great ideas in which they can contribute or help.
In fact, Devjani, that would be of great help to us.
So how do they go about it? What's the best way for them to?
I'll tell you, MAP has almost become like a laboratory for ideas.
Right.
So if you have any of your partner companies who are members of NASSCOM, or startups who are looking at where art and technology or culture and technology can meet, MAP can be the guinea pig. They can come and work with us. We'll figure something out. We'll do something. I mean, very often it started off literally as a germ of an idea and changed into something quite dramatic and bigger. And now many of these companies are coming for a second round and a third round with us to keep trying. Because I think even if it is just helping the art and culture space to start with, there will be enough business cases for that application tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's just so much creativity that exists, especially in the startup ecosystem. This can be another way that they can absolutely contribute towards something meaningful. And I know so many of the founders are eagerly looking for these opportunities. So, if you are listening and you are interested to explore possibilities, do reach out to MAP, do reach out to Abhishek. Any advice to the people watching? I mean, I know a lot of them would most probably have not yet got started on their journey into the world of art. So if they are planning to, what would you advise them? What's the first step and what's the second step?
I think art is all around us, Devjani. When people say, I don't get it, I don't understand art, it's not for me. I guess they have a limited idea or a bad experience that they may have gone through when they were forced to go to a museum trip from school. But, art is the way we do the rangoli outside our homes. Yeah. Art is the way you would, set up your puja room. Art is the way you drape your sari. Yeah. Art is in our textiles, in our craft, in everything around us. Possibly we have so much of it that we become oblivious to it. Yeah. But if you just allow art to play its role, if you just, we hope to do that with MAP, where art can entertain, art can educate, art can create the atmosphere. There's no way it doesn't do its magic. If you started by saying art is really and culture is really about who we are, who is not interested in knowing who we are and where we come from?
Man, I cannot agree more. And when is the museum opening? When is the physical launch?
It opens to the public on the 11th of December this year.
11th of December. So do keep that date on your calendars. But I don't think we need to wait till that happens.
We have a museum ready digitally. You can
digital museums ready and just logging on
map-india.org. So we have a full-fledged museum. You can be a member of the digital museum. We are doing 100 events a year, and they're all available digitally.
There you go. So you can actually get started just sitting in your living rooms, and you can take my word for it for whatever it counts. That it's a fantastic experience. It is an experience of discovery, and it is an experience of learning, and it just gives you a different perspective. So do start. Abhishek, thank you so much for joining us today, having this conversation. I know that these are the conversations we need to have as we unravel this thing that we call the decade, which is the decade of action with technology at its center, because we're running out of time, honestly, to given all the different challenges that's coming our way. And this is the decade when we really have to focus on making technology real. And kudos to people like you who are doing it. And these are the stories that we really want to tell. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Devjani.